And putting pressure on the two princesses to then put pressure on their own father. But he said, okay, sources told The Sun today that he knows his time at Royal Lodge is coming to an end. But apparently in return, he's demanded two houses for him to go to Frogmore Cottage. Of course, he was offered that.
Prince Andrew isn't fighting for tradition. He's squatting in yesterday, clutching Royal Lodge like a relic who still thinks Duke is a master key. And the palace?
After she was caught on camera promising a reporter access to Prince Andrew in exchange for £500,000, which for reference converts to about $690,000.
They've finally changed the locks. Keep watching, because you're about to learn who really pulled the plug on Royal Lodge, why Sarah Ferguson quietly flipped from loyal lifeline to exit strategist, how Beatrice and Eugenie pressed for a clean break.
But also the problem was when the late Queen was alive, there were other issues at stake there. You know, he was seen as the favoured son. So there was a lot of emotion, and that's why it was hard for the royal family to deal with it, and perhaps why the Queen was prepared to help front up that.
The money trail behind Frogmore and the Mayfair sell-off, and the one domino that, once it falls, reshapes the Yorks' relevance, their finances, and their future inside a family that's done paying for old mistakes. Here's the truth no one around Royal Lodge wants to say out loud.
Russell, a friend of Sarah Ferguson, has revealed that she's on the cusp of a nervous breakdown as her daughters are being dragged into the scandal over her association with Jeffrey Epstein.
For 3 decades, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew sold a fairy tale the public half believed. The world's happiest divorced couple. They ate together, traveled together, smiled together, and lived together. Maybe nearing its end.
Ferguson makes a major social media change after her ex, Prince Andrew, gives up his royal title. 4 days after her ex-husband, Prince Andrew, announced he would no longer use his royal titles, such as Duke of York, his ex-wife has updated her social media to remove references to her.
Long after the paperwork said they were done. It was cute, it was convenient, and it kept the questions away. But convenience has an expiration date, especially when the crown is footing the optics. What you're seeing now isn't a lover's quarrel. It's the slow, deliberate dismantling of a private arrangement that stopped being private a long time ago. Start with the pressure campaign. If you think this is just about a house, you've missed the game. Behind closed doors, the message moved through the lanes the monarchy always uses when it wants action without a headline.
The situation has affected Sarah Ferguson. She's been forced to relinquish her titles. I think it's quite unfortunate, you know, that we have to discuss people's mental health in all of this, because it will no doubt take a huge effect on the people involved and those around them.
Quiet calls, carefully chosen intermediaries, and family first. Him putting pressure on the two princesses to then put pressure on their father. That's the soft glove tactic the palace prefers when it can avoid a public showdown. And what happened? He said okay. Not because he wanted to, because the circle around him stopped shielding him. When your daughters, the calm center of a very loud family, are the ones telling you it's time, you're out of moves. SOY is Royal Lodge the hill he's chosen to die on. Because Royal Lodge isn't just an address. It's a symbol. It's routine. It's yesterday, preserved in amber. It is the last comfortable illusion that nothing really changed after 1996, after the headlines, after the disgrace, after the titles. Strip that away, and what's left? A man facing the present tense for the first time in years. Now, about those demands. Reports say he knows his time at Royal Lodge is ending, but in return he's floated conditions. Talk of 2 houses, talk of Frogmore Cottage, talk of compensations that sound less like negotiations and more like nostalgia with a price tag. Frogmore was offered 2 years ago. He didn't take it. Why? Because Frogmore isn't Royal Lodge, and status isn't just square footage. It's the story people tell themselves when they pull up the drive. But the story has changed. The palace can't keep underwriting a museum exhibit called Andrew's Old Life. The public won't buy a ticket. While the noise swirled around him, Sarah moved differently. No press releases. No defiance. No grand speeches. Just little changes with big meanings. For days after he announced he would no longer use royal titles, she updated her social media to remove references to Duchess of York. That's not an accident. That's a signal. That's a woman who has finally admitted what the palace decided months ago. The only way forward is separate. Separate optics. Separate addresses. Separate consequences. But here's the part that reveals the real plan. Weeks before the Royal Lodge headlines crested, Sarah quietly sold her Mayfair townhouse and took a loss. Who sells in a weak market at a loss unless they're buying time? unless they need to be liquid, mobile, and unencumbered. If you zoom out, the pattern is unmistakable. Title references gone. London base gone. Ties to Windsor routines loosening. She is not reacting. She is preparing. For what? For a life that finally belongs to her. And not to yesterday's problems. Let's talk motive, because that's where skeptics always get loud. They'll say she's panicking. They'll say she's cornered. But listen to the timing, not the shouting. The townhouse sale before the Royal Lodge drama. The social media shift in step with his title climb down. The tone in recent interviews, softer, firmer, less indulgent of the past. That's not panic. That's sequencing. That's an exit strategy drawn with a ruler, not a crayon. And then there are the daughters. Beatrice and Eugenie are the Yorks' quiet miracle, two women who built stable, modern lives while the ground shook under their feet. They know what living in limbo costs. They know what it feels like to carry headlines they didn't write. So when whispers say they urge Sarah to prioritize herself, to choose freedom over familiarity, believe it. It doesn't take palace intrigue to explain that. It takes two daughters who are tired of seeing their mother pay the bill for someone else's yesterday. If you want the inflection point, look at the night the phone stopped ringing for the usual favors. For years, when he needed smoothing over, she smoothed. When he needed cover, she covered. When he needed the fairy tale reheated, she set the table. Not anymore. The distance isn't just physical, it's strategic. The inseparable exes act isn't playing in the room that matters. And when your audience changes from tabloids to treasury, sentimental narratives lose every time that, of course, independence isn't free. Sarah's next chapter comes with questions that aren't poetic, they're practical. Can she fund a life without the quiet cushions that came with proximity to Windsor? The lucrative endorsements that once papered over debts have thinned. The reputation hits, from the Sting video years back to the association missteps, left scars that brands don't forget. And yet, she's still here. She writes. She sells. She connects. She shows up. What most people miss is that her currency isn't just money. It's resilience. It's access that doesn't depend on a title and a bio. It's the one thing she's had from day one. The ability to make people feel like they know her. If she leans into that with discipline, not impulse, she can turn a page instead of reliving a chapter. So what does Andrew actually lose when Royal Lodge goes? Start with control. For a man who's navigated the fallout by clinging to familiar walls, relocation is not just an address change. It's an identity change. He loses the illusion that the world paused for him somewhere around 2002. He loses the gravitational center that kept certain allies in orbit. And yes, he loses leverage because leverage requires something others want. A house the palace wants you out of is not leverage. It's a countdown. What does Sarah gain by walking away? Clarity. The ability to make a decision without asking how it reads for him. The permission to be a mother and grandmother without doubling as a fixer. The end of a performance that served everyone but her. Most of all, she gains time, the one asset she can still reallocate. No more waiting for the next shoe to drop at Windsor. No more holding her breath when the Sunday papers hit the driveway. Just her choices, her consequences, and her pace. Where does she go? The obvious play is not obvious addresses. Not a flashy London postcode under a constant lens. Think privacy with proximity. Think a countryside base the cameras can't casually reach. Or a period abroad where you can be famous on your own terms instead of infamous on someone else's. If you're listening for her next move, listen for the word haven, not mansion. Listen for retreat, not return. Now let's close the loop on the palace's role, because you can already hear the chorus. Why now? Because the monarch changed, the mood changed, and the margins changed. When the late queen was alive, sentiment slowed the blade. He was the favored son. Emotion mattered. Today, the calculus is colder. Cost, optics, sustainability. A king who prizes order will not bankroll disorder dressed as tradition. That's why you're seeing soft power first, daughters, cousins, quiet courtiers, and hard outcomes second, keys, leases, titles, logistics. The crown prefers mercy in tone and clarity in outcome. This is both S.O. Is Sarah finally done? The signs say yes. The townhouse sale wasn't a whim. The social media change wasn't an accident. The shift from reactive to deliberate wasn't a mood swing. She's liquidating complications. She's writing in the first person again. She is, at last, choosing a life that doesn't begin and end at the gates of a house that never really belonged to her. And what about Beatrice and Eugenie? They stand to gain something precious. Space. Space to be themselves without their father's headlines clouding every room they enter. Space to support their mother as a woman who's choosing herself, not as a character in their father's never-ending rerun. Space to be Yorks without the footnotes. Here's your timeline, stitched without the fluff. Pressure rises inside the family channels.